So we now have a somewhat historical look at the year past and the projections for the year to come. Now, Mr. President, the context within which this matter is before the Honourable Chamber is driven by the existing Public Finance Management Act, and you will see it, as you quite rightly corrected, at Order number 6 in the first page of the document. And so it outlines the basis on which this is presented to the country. The Director of Finance and Economic Affairs presents the document, and then we have an opportunity to lay it in Parliament. Comments are received as need be, presented to Cabinet, and if there are any responses, then they are so provided. So this is the matter that is before the Chamber this morning, and it is a useful debate today, given where we spent our morning looking at the question of Barbados' fiscal management and the management of its debt affairs. Now, I want to state at the outset, Mr. President, that we have a current debt to GDP ratio of 104%, which is expected to fall into the double digits during the course of this fiscal year. We have a number of instruments on the international market, but I want to also take the opportunity to speak about instruments that are on the local market, especially since one particular honourable senator is here with us this afternoon and would not have been here earlier in a different conversation. But, Mr. President, this government has focused on a series of things, including equity and inclusion for all Barbadians. It has created an environment where Barbadians can feel comfortable in investing, as well as foreign investors feeling comfortable in investing in the Barbados economy. It has created a series of BERT programs, BERT 1 and BERT 2, that has mapped out Barbados' economic trajectory. It has mapped out as well the fiscal framework as captured in the document that is before us today. It has planned out what government's projections are and our forecasting is for our fiscal outturns, and it has prioritized a fiscal strategy over the medium term. That medium-term strategy speaks to a couple of pillars as captured in the document, and I go through bits of it, some parts of it, for the benefit of our listening audience. Debt stabilization, which is the reason why I started where I started. The importance of prioritizing our debt stabilization through prudent public expenditure management and revenue generation. We spoke in a different incarnation, Mr. President, about the international investment climate and investment confidence in Barbados. But, Mr. President, we also have in the local market, not to create any disparity between local versus international markets, we have a bond, Mr. President, that is currently in the market and has remained in the market for some time, amounting to $250 million at an interest rate in Barbados dollars for local investors at 7.8%. The international bond that we spoke about is 8%. Now, this particular matter, Mr. President, is amortized over 20 years, and for those who are interested still in investing, there is a remaining $4.5 million that is available for uptake. But there is parity between local and international investments in long-term instruments here in Barbados. The second pillar, Mr. President, of this medium-term fiscal strategy is private sector-led growth. Now, the private sector is the instrument, the entity is a grouping through which all business is transacted, all trade takes place, and the government's responsibility is to create an enabling environment that would allow for the private sector to grow and therefore in turn drive growth. The third pillar, Mr. President, is social inclusion, ensuring that we have targeted public investments in the social space, social sectors, and I will go into some of those in a few moments. The green economy transition, which speaks to issues, one of which is under my purview, which is renewable energy investments. And then finally, digitization. Mr. President. So as I go through the medium-term fiscal framework and we look at 2024 into 2025, 2026, I don't feel as if I'm going to go over, Mr. President, the well-shared information that has come out of the central bank reports and other reports on the performance of the tourism sector that has been made clear here, Mr. President, but specifically as we're talking about the construction sector, for example, we have seen a growth there in 7.1% for the period of 2024, last year. And that is resulting from things like increased hotel activity and public sector related projects. We've seen that as a result of those two things, along with the roads project, along with the water infrastructure rehabilitation project, and along with the construction of a new geriatric hospital. And when you drive along the highway, on the ABC highway, when you get by the Hothersville Junction, right before you turn down left to go to Waterford, you can see that large facility there. You can see where the government is spending its money, and there is a visible edifice right there just before Waterford, which is meant to be the new geriatric hospital for Barbados. In terms of inflation for that corresponding period, the inflation rate stood at around 1.6% at the end of May 2024 when compared to the previous year, where it was 2.2% in May 2023. And the 12-month moving average inflation rate ranged around 2.7% in May 2024, which is a reduction from the May 2023 number of 4.2%, Mr. President. Externally, our position remained strong. We then ended up with increasing gross reserves, totaling about $3.2 billion, accounting for 32.2 weeks of import cover. Now, Mr. President, under the 2022 BERT plan, which then would have allowed for a trajectory that led up to where we were in 2024, there were a number of priorities. There were 5 of them in particular, and 6 of them, and I want to draw our attention to them. Investing in and deepening our skills development, specifically in this instance through the National Transformation Initiative. Focusing on mobilizing domestic savings for public and private investment. Using the government's role to enable growth, and I spoke about that in terms of private sector-led growth. Fast-tracking the integration of the country's mainstays. Tourism is one of them, but let us not be in any doubt. The global business sector is the sector that when tourism during the COVID years was not performing and there was a reduction of 73% plus over the course of 2 years, the global business sector, by way of corporation taxes supporting our then known international business regime, is what kept the government's revenue base afloat. Last year, Mr. President, the government netted in corporation taxes, especially after the corporation tax reform process of January 2024, the government netted $1 billion in revenue in corporation taxes, in particular from companies that now shifted from the nominal tax rate of 2% up to a tax rate of 9%. That generated close to $1 billion in revenue, and the Prime Minister, in her wisdom, then said, if we have excess revenue that was unplanned over $470 million the previous year, share the burden, share the bounty, and all of Barbados benefited as a consequence of that. Prime Minister had said so. So we've seen that the global business sector continues to grow. We have seen, Mr. President, that we have a number of global businesses here that have made Barbados home and is their domicile. And I'm going to come in a minute to speak about why the work of the government on facilitating the global business sector is so important. So, Mr. President, not only did we have the BERT program, not only did we have the pillars of the medium-term fiscal strategy, but we also then had a series of missions, Mr. President. And these missions were developed in partnership with the Social Partnership, Mr. President. And there are 6 pillars in total, ranging from a number of things, and I'm sure that Senator Thompson in particular likes mission number 1, so that by 2030, Barbados is meant to become a clean and beautiful large ocean state. championing sustainable development locally and globally, with the goal of all domestic activities becoming 100% sustainable by 2035. Goal number 2035. By 2030, the anticipation is that Barbados will have a country of active and involved citizens. We want to make sure that Barbadians are involved in the leadership of their country, in the governance of the small things and in the big things. The third one, Mr. President, is about making sure we have access to clean water and nutritious food, sustaining our bodies and our health. By 2030, we also are looking at wellness and happiness, improving public health and safety, leading to a 50% reduction in non-communicable diseases. This is something that I'm sure, Mr. President, that Senator Maynard would want to make sure that he has an active role or continues to play an active role in ensuring our health and wellness, Mr. President. We also, by 2030, are hoping to enfranchise all Barbadian workers and families by creating opportunities for ownership and wealth creation that allow Barbadians to take better care of themselves and to reduce the rate of poverty by 50. And then finally, the sixth mission is that by 2030, we aim to transform Barbados into a high-functioning, resilient society with seamless access to services and meaningful digital inclusion. Now, I want to get into the meat of the matter as to what those missions mean and what they mean when they collide with the fiscal term strategy and with the government's annual programming. During the course of the financial year 25-26 and 27-28, the government set a number of priorities. The first one, number one, was creating Business Barbados. Business Barbados was created during 2025 on the 1st of April 2025 in this financial year, and then incorporated, I call it, subsumed what used to be the Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Office, and now incorporates all aspects of business facilitation. Now, what is the government doing? Now, Senator Reid is here, and together with Senator Reid, who is the Minister with responsibility for Export Barbados and the industrial sector, including the manufacturing sector, the Minister for the other place, Minister McConney, who is responsible for Invest Barbados, us three as ministers and the three CEOs of those agencies have now come together to champion Brand Barbados and to ensure that there's policy coherence between the work being undertaken by Invest Barbados, which focuses on the inbound, inward attraction of investment. That investment attractiveness is important. Export Barbados, formerly known as BIDC, which focuses on the outbound, the export part of Barbados. What is Barbados exporting? And then in the middle, once you're able to land business into the country or you have local businesses growing in the country, we want to ensure we're making this country the place to do business. Right now, and historically for the last little while, it's been really difficult. As I sat here earlier today, there was someone who was messaging me about having to get a business registered, and I was saying to them, go online, start the process, and if you have any difficulty, message me back, and I will be sure to help you. We want to get to a stage where no one has to message me or anyone else to help them through the system, where business registration becomes an easy part of doing business and everything else relating to doing business. Increasing public and private sector partnerships is number two, Mr. President, as a priority for the upcoming fiscal year and for the last fiscal year as well. This is something that you have been seeing in the sugar industry, for example, where there are partnerships as well between the government and the private sector. You've seen it in the tourism sector, government partnering with the private sector, and you will see a lot more of that. Reviewing tax structures and new investment funds. This has been something that has been led by the government. You've seen the first wave of that with the corporation tax reform that was undertaken in January of last year. You've seen me bring a bill to this honorable chamber, the foreign currency permits bill. That was a part of the reform of the processes. We have legislation that will come on economic substance. That is also underway. And in the Ministry of Energy and Business, specifically with the business side, we are undertaking a comprehensive review of all of the pieces of legislation. There were 30 pieces of legislation directly and indirectly related to the business sector. We are now in the process of undertaking a comprehensive legislative review. So that is important work which is underway. Senator Reid, as Minister with responsibility for MIST, is anchoring and leading the process of digitization and data center creation in Barbados. And we expect that with the creation of a dedicated ministry focusing on training at the tertiary level, that you will see the correlation being drawn between investments in digitization and investments in training of skills and development, which would allow for those two things to collide. Increased access to financing for the private and public sectors, Mr. President. This government has established fund access. Not fund access, trust loans. Fund access has been around for quite a long time, but we have established trust loans. And on this Saturday at Weymouth, I want to ensure that you are able to come out and join the leads of fund access, of trust loans, and all of the other institutions that they support at Weymouth grounds. They will be having a great fair to allow for entrepreneurs and small businesses, people who are interested in doing business in this country, to come out and get involved. And they're doing it in Weymouth now, yes, but they have also been following the regathering agenda from parish to parish, going in each of the communities and having these expos for members of the community. When people come from the community, they come from all walks of life. They don't have a political color, they just want to be able to start a business, and fund access and trust loans are there for that purpose. Equally so, Mr. President, through the ministry, I am proud to also share that we have also onboarded a new lead coordinator, a national financial literacy coordinator, who, along with the trust loans and the fund access, they are collaboratively building out the national financial literacy program that helps people to understand how to manage their finances in their households, how to start a business, how to look at investments, how to deal with credit relationships, how to look at cooperative relationships, so that you have the full gamut, Mr. President, of financial literacy, not just about how you manage $20, but every different level of financial literacy. These are important components, Mr. President, of increasing access to financing, especially in the private sector. Unlocking renewable energy investments. I want to spend 2 minutes here, Mr. President. Now, in my ministry, we have a habit of conducting industry briefings on a quarterly basis. Under the leadership of the Barbados Renewable Energy Association, where many of the installers and so on have been members for a long time, they are invited usually to briefings, and we call them industry briefings. And we share where the ministry is going and where the sector is going. 2 Fridays ago, together with BREA, we hosted a public briefing. We had the members of BREA there, we had the members of the Green Council of the Chamber of Commerce there, and many of the independent power producers either joined online or they were there in person. And in that way, we have kept the sector updated through their representative bodies on what is happening with the sector. What did we share in that public briefing, Mr. President? We said a couple of things. And why are these things important in the context of a fiscal framework? Why are they important in the context of geopolitical instability, Mr. President? And why are they important in the context of Barbados' prioritization of the renewable energy sector? Mr. President, when we started to talk about the green energy transition and the renewable energy transition, we talked about a lot of things. We talked about climate, which is important. We talked about the moral imperative of doing that which was the right thing to do and for the right reasons. That is true too, Mr. President. But in this environment, while those things are true, there are other things that are also just as true, Mr. President. And what are those other things? If Barbados is spending $1 billion in the last financial year on imported fossil fuels, and we can replace that expenditure by generating renewable energy from sources within the country, like the sun, like the wind, it creates a sense of energy security and energy independence for this country that mitigates the risk of imported fossil fuels, Mr. President. This is now a question of energy independence and energy security. It is a question of national security, as a matter of fact. And so what did we share with the industry 2 Fridays ago? We said to the industry, and we say here now, that the renewable energy transition is a must and an absolute imperative for the government of Barbados. It is a must and an absolute imperative for the people of Barbados. We said then, and we will say now, Mr. President, that the number of licenses that were issued for the provision of renewable energy projects in the country was in surplus. And it meant that the grid could no longer take any more of those licenses, Mr. President. It was full. And so it didn't matter how many times people called who and what they wanted to do and how they begged, the grid was full. That was a fact. And what we needed to be able to do was to create a new investment structure for battery energy storage systems. We came to this honorable chamber, Mr. President, and we then spoke about introducing for the first time competitive procurement as a means of introducing new forms of energy into the country. We developed an Electricity Supply Act passed through this honorable chamber, which included provisions that spoke about competitive procurement and for the first time a legislative framework for battery energy storage systems. It didn't exist before, Mr. President. And so under this pillar, unlocking renewable energy investments, we then were able to say to the country 2 Fridays ago that we are now on the cusp of grid unlock. And how are we on the cusp of grid unlock? We have launched now Barbados' very first competitive procurement for battery energy storage systems. It is a 60-megawatt procurement project which the government is not procuring for itself. The private sector will invest, again, public and private, and we will then combine that, Mr. President, with an energy storage tariff which has already been launched by the Fair Trading Commission for a further 50 megawatts, Mr. President, and the Barbados Light and Power, through their Clean Energy Transition Rider, has been approved for 15 megawatts. The cumulative impact, Mr. President, of those 3 tiers of battery energy storage systems at utility scale will allow for the grid in Barbados to be unlocked and for green energy investments, renewable energy investments to be unlocked and to allow for Barbados to achieve a higher level of energy security and energy independence. We are also, Mr. President, in the advanced stages, and we expect that by the middle of July, if not the last week in July, we will launch for the first time Barbados' first major wind farm between 50 to 60 megawatts of wind energy in the St. Lucie and St. Thomas area. And we are in an advanced stage of facilitating that with the assistance of our transaction advisors on that project, the International Financial Corporation, and on the World Bank, that is, and on the BEST side, RELP, based out of Argentina, Mr. President. So that is where we are on renewable energy. We also have an objective here, Mr. President, of addressing Barbados' demographic challenges and population, and speaking about provisions for the support of the elderly. We have exporting capital to diversify investments, establishing the pharmaceutical industry, which Senator Reid, along with Export Barbados, have been leading on, developing Barbados as an agro-processing hub, and incentivizing a vibrant and creative industry and film industry. And I believe that there is work meant to come on the film sector in short order, and you will hear more of that from Senator Monroe Knight when she returns from duty. So, Mr. President, there is a full sectoral approach that has been mapped out in this fiscal strategy, a development strategy, a growth strategy, and on the internal side, a fiscal management strategy that is designed to address where Barbados needs to go. But I can't speak about where Barbados is proposing to go without addressing the question of risks, Mr. President. Geopolitical conflicts are a real thing. Supply chain disruptions are a real thing. Inflationary pressures as a result of external factors, they are a real thing, as are extreme weather events. These are all things that the government has mitigated for, has put measures in place to treat to, and the expectation, Mr. President, is that the combination of Barbados's medium-term fiscal strategy, as outlined in the 5 areas, are fiscal consolidation through our debt strategy, Mr. President, as well as our growth strategy and the implementation of our missions-driven economy, that Barbados will achieve the objectives of having a growing, vibrant society, a growing, vibrant economy that prioritizes its people and its citizens in every possible respect, Mr. President. This medium-term fiscal strategy, I want to commend to this honorable chamber the leadership of the finance team. I want to acknowledge them as well. They have done a stellar job under difficult conditions, Mr. President. The work of the Ministry of Finance as well, along with the line ministries on state-owned enterprise reform, has been a huge part of the process. When we're talking about the Transport Board, when we're talking about the Barbados Water Authority, even under my own purview, the Barbados National Energy Company, which now has amalgamated the Barbados National Terminal Company with the Barbados National Oil Company, and we expect that the National Petroleum Corporation will also be incorporated in short order into the Barbados National Energy Company. Mr. President, these are the main items that I wanted to raise under the circumstances of a somewhat delayed debate on this matter, and I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
Thank you very much, Senator Cummins. Any speakers? If none, I'll put the question.
Mr. President, I beg to move this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The next ayes have it. This resolution is now passed.
Mr. President, order number 8. In the name of the Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225, the vesting in the National Housing Corporation of a parcel of land, more particularly describing the schedule thereto, the property of the state situated at Coverley in the parish of Christchurch in this island for housing development.
Senator Cummins.
Thank you, Mr. President. With your permission, I'd like to treat to order number 8 and 9 as a coordinated debate.
The question is that we treat order number 8, vesting of land in the NHC, and order number 9, lease of land to the Barbados Association for Cancer Advocacy, both situated at Coverley in the parish of Christchurch, as a coordinated debate. And just to remind that the main policy issues are dealt with in one debate, and then we vote individually on items number 8, item number 9. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The next ayes have it. Please proceed. Be sure to speak to both issues of order number 8 and order number 9 in your introduction. Senator Cummins.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The two bills that are before us are short bills. The two resolutions, I'm sorry, which are before us are two short resolutions. I'm going to start first with order number 8. Order number 8 speaks about Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225, approving the vesting in the NHC of the land at Coverley for the purpose that has been outlined, and we know what that purpose is. I'll come back to that for a minute, and then I'll come back to the second one, which is order number 9, resolving that the Parliament, in accordance with the same legislation, approved the lease of the lands in this area to the Barbados Association for Cancer Advocacy, Mr. President. So this is the matter that we are dealing with. The areas of land identified, Mr. President, at Coverley were recognized as suitable for the provision of a hospice for a couple of reasons, Mr. President. One, that they have already well-constructed buildings, which, while they need repairs and retrofitting, would reduce the construction costs, making the project feasible. The site is set apart from areas of concentrated population, and so it's accessible to family and friends going to visit their loved ones. It is sufficiently large to create a quiet and peaceful sanctuary that offers privacy to patients and families at their most vulnerable time. That there is room to expand and offer related residential services as the demand subsequently grows. And then it allows for the opportunity to grow produce to cater to patients' nutritional needs and income generation to help sustain the operation of the hospice. And it is also within easy access of the Grantley Adams International Airport, which would then allow for hospite and respite tourism, where persons can come to Barbados to be able to stay at this hospice at this vulnerable time in their life, Mr. President. Now, the program aims to ease pain and help persons with problems if the illness is serious, but is not considered to be immediately life-threatening. It also helps persons to live with the symptoms of long-running cases of cancer, kidney disease, AIDS, or with the side effects of treatment. So the hospice care versus palliative care is one that we all understand what is happening here. But Mr. President, I think I want to just land in a few minutes on this point. There are lands at Coverley which would ordinarily be used under this resolution for 33 housing solutions. They're going to be there, Mr. President, to be vested for the purpose of this transaction. This is not for houses. This is for a care facility. And so, Mr. President, what is meant to happen here is that they're to be vested under the National Housing Corporation for the provision of housing under this particular program. The Director of Planning and Development has supported the allocations, Mr. President, for this purpose, and it is meant to have the development of 33 residential lots and to vest those lands in the National Housing Corporation for the establishment of a hospice and palliative care facility for the terminally ill. This is the matter before the Honourable Chamber, Mr. President, and I beg to move that these two resolutions do not pass. That order number 8 do not pass.
Any speakers on this resolution? Senator Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have a full set of long teeth in medicine, 40 years since I graduated. And I recall, as an early graduate, the difficulties in looking after patients who returned to the hospital for terminal care. And it's ironic, as I prepare to exit 40 years on, that we'll finally have a hospice in Barbados. Sir, the Barbados Association for Cancer Advocacy was established, I believe, in 2011. And here we are in 2025, finally at this stage. I have tremendous praise and respect for those who have persisted and fought this long battle that is not yet over. CERT is a community-based voluntary organization, and its stated goal is to minimize the impact of cancer on Barbadians by promoting, 1, education. Secondly, early detection, and thirdly, the treatment of cancer. One might think that if you educated the entire population regarding cancer and you had early detection, the need for hospice would decline. But sir, we all know that we don't live forever. And there will always be issues towards the end for some, if not for all. But the Barbados Association for Cancer Advocacy, sir, does not wish to exist alone, and it has a very interesting history. It is committed, sir, to decreasing cancer prevalence, the morbidity and mortality, and stated to wish to reduce and alleviate suffering and the burden on the economic burden on the healthcare system. Sir, this NGO was established by the Barbados Cancer Association USA, which itself was established in 2005. And that organization has been providing tremendous services to Barbados for early detection, scholarship, research, and provision of medical equipment for patients with cancer. The mission statement is to minimize the impact of cancer on persons living in Barbados. Not just Barbadians, persons living in Barbados. And that's a very holistic statement. There's no standalone hospice presently in Barbados. And sir, this would be, there was a previous attempt to have a standalone hospice, but I think COVID kind of scuppered that. But this standalone hospice and palliative care facility for individuals will be managed by a board of trustees in a very organized fashion. I will not stand up here and list all the persons who will be involved, but they are well qualified to do the job, sir. The previous attempt was by the Living Water community, but as I said, that effort failed, unfortunately. It's proposed that this hospice will have 14 beds. And one might ask, and if you listen to the utterances in the other place, if we have changes in the rates of cancer, rates in the incidence of cancer among our people, will 14 beds be enough? It is believed, sir, that based on our population, then they'd be more than adequate. And not all terminal cancer cases need to be managed in a hospice. As our social services improve, we should be able to manage more people in the comfort of their homes. Sir, the chronic non-communicable diseases are also a burden, and this hospice proposes to also manage some of these patients. The current running organization already does that. If one had the privilege to see their annual report, you will notice that among the patients are not only cancer patients, but patients with renal failure and diabetes and other conditions. So the work which they do is pretty widespread. It was in 2002, I believe, that the WHO had suggested or recommended that governments should integrate their palliative care along with their public health programs. And the government of the day, and I don't believe I need to identify who the government of the day was. The government of the day commissioned a study called the Barbados Palliative Care Needs Association Project, and the report in 2012 suggested that we had met that threshold where we should have a freestanding facility. So it would be its establishment would be a significant cost saving, I believe, for our only tertiary care institution, where large numbers of beds are still occupied by persons in a very rigid clinical environment in their final days. In a hospice, the rules are much less rigid, and persons can spend their time with a greater level of comfort and less restriction. So it will be a good thing, sir. Sir, I was hoping that my minister might have been sitting across from me and could possibly answer some of the burning questions I have with cancer care, but unfortunately, he isn't. But we do have, at this point in time in this country, the continuing problem of what I call a transition, where in Barbados at present, there is no available radiotherapy facility. And the government has invested in upgrading the facility and are about to install a linear accelerator, which is a more modern method of treatment with better success. But unfortunately, as in all things government, and I say this without any reservation, there have been delays. And unlike delays in building houses, delays in this matter will cost lives, and has cost lives. But the government made an alternative plan to spend large sums of money to send persons overseas. And believe me, they've been doing it, but the cost keeps mounting. So I would like those who have been paid by the government to do the job, to get on with it and finish it. Because every day we delay, we're hurting people. And the government cannot afford to send everyone who needs treatment overseas. It's very, very, very expensive. If they spend the money sending people overseas, there will be less money to treat the other people who need medical care. Sir, it's on that note that I wish to say a few things about dialysis in Barbados. And I've said it before in this chamber, and I wish to say it again, and maybe someone will listen. Every year, the hospital spends over $25 million on one line item, dialysis. 25 million of a close to $200 million budget. There are very, 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 very few companies in this country that have total budgets of $25 million. And those who come even close to it have boards, they have a well laid out management structure, but there is none. This one line item that takes up, it is probably the biggest item when you look at it in terms of expenditure, and the next biggest item will be salaries. But there's no one assigned to manage dialysis. So And we know that with the chronic, non-communicable diseases on the rise, that there are more and greater numbers of patients requiring dialysis. While we might not be able to reduce the expenditure, we might be able to do far more with the savings. So if someone really needs 3 days of dialysis 3 times a week, but can only get 2 because of the large numbers, we might be able to get that person on 3 days if we had cost savings. So I would like those in charge to contemplate having a manager to manage that $25 million budget. To me, it seems totally nonsensical. There must, sir, be cost savings that can be made in a $25 million budget. And saving money in dialysis will save lives. Sir, most of us who serve in medicine, I say serve because we do serve, have to give of ourselves and our time, and we can't do all the things that our friends do with the spontaneity that they can because we are restricted. I am not much of a drinker, and there are times when I may wish to have a glass of wine, but I can't because I'm on call, I don't know when I might be called. And I can't turn up with shaking hands and wobbling. Some people. And I think that all of our patients, those who we can cure and those who we can't, deserve compassion. And I hope that the level of compassion which we can provide in a hospice will be far better than we provide in a tertiary care, acute care hospital. So I congratulate all those who've been working to bring this project to fruition. But I wondered whether the government has been fair in its lease arrangement. I understand that it's a 25-year lease. But this government recently gave a bank an important piece of real estate. And this is a permanent, I believe it's permanent, requirement in the healthcare system that will ease the burden on our tertiary care institution and families. And I wondered whether this land should not have been donated also to the organization. I've also wondered about the organizations, which is a registered charity, whether its rating for duty-free concessions and such like reaches the same level as the QEH. The QEH, if my memory serves me correctly, is what is called has a zero-rated status. And I wonder whether this hospice should not have the same, because it will provide very similar services to what's in a hospital, but in a much friendlier environment. And sir, with those few words, I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Maynard. Thank you for your compassionate service. Senator Reverend Morris.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise to support this resolution that is before this chamber. But sir, I would want to beg your leave, sir, to address. Sir, I want to honestly beg your leave to say something to you, sir, and this honorable chamber. Do I have your permission, sir?
You have me curious.
Yes, sir.
You've risen, and
Yeah, to support, but
it is your right
I
to
just beg
speak.
your leave to say something.
But asking me leave makes me wonder if what you're going to say is against the rules.
No, I'm not going to say, no, sir, not against the rules.
So please proceed in accordance,
Honestly, sir,
in accordance with standing orders. You don't need special permission for anything within the standing orders.
Okay, sir. I feel compelled to do it because, one, I recognize that I live by Christian principles and also that I'm a priest. And the last time I spoke from this chamber, I made an outburst in which I was asked to withdraw those remarks. There comes a time, sir, when the withdrawal of remarks is not enough. And I want to apologize to you, sir, and all my colleagues in here for that outburst which I made. I want to say I'm very sorry, and I'm sure that I will abide by the rules of this honorable chamber.
Thank you very much, Reverend Charles Morris, for your fine example, and it is fully accepted and greatly appreciated.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir, I now speak to the resolution. And I want to begin by saying that we are all familiar with some words called rescue the perishing, care for the dying. Jesus is merciful, and Jesus will save. And I believe, sir, that as a priest, I have also been involved in palliative care. I remember attending a bereavement counseling program in Canada some years ago. And for me, it was very touching when persons talked about their own families who were dying, and there's nothing that they could do. And some of them were dying in pain with no recourse, no institutions. And so I want to support this resolution, sir, because it is the moral and ethical thing to do. We have a moral obligation as a community, as a society, to care for our most vulnerable members. And I'm sure with the support of a palliative care facility, it is not just about health services, but it's also about the admission and declaration that every life matters, no matter its stage. That dignity, comfort, and love, even especially as they face the end of their life, that these are important. I had to do last rites, both here and in England. And at the end of it, I was given a book by one of the persons there. It is entitled Hospice and Palliative Care, The Essential Guide. It is written by Stephen Connor. And I purchased another book, Hospice and Palliative Medicine, a clinical guide by Susan Bodke and Kathy Lagon. And they have informed me most of what I'm going to say this at this particular juncture. And why do we need such a facility? Because it is a facility for comfort, not for crisis. Some palliative care is delivered in hospitals or home, and a facility such as this will offer a consistent, compassionate, comforting environment designed especially to meet those complex needs that we see in these facilities. Just a few months ago, I visited a colleague who was in a palliative institution, and I could not help but really being in awe about the serenity and the peace that is there. You see, sir, palliative care, in my view, is not just a race against time. It's about being present. My experiences going to and fro have taught me that these facilities can provide rooms, quiet spaces for families, access to nature, warm lighting, and home-like settings that soothe the soul as much as the body. But it is also the financially right thing to do, which may appear to be counterintuitive in what I'm saying, but it can also reduce healthcare costs by reducing unnecessary hospital visits, freeing up space and staff for acute care needs, while at the same time ensuring patients with chronic serious illnesses are cared for with appropriate intensity. A palliative care institution, sir, is good for an aging population, and we know that Barbados is an aging population. And if that is so, there is the possibility of a rising number of people with complex chronic illnesses. And I believe that such challenges could be met with the completion of a palliative care center offering sustainable human care. But it's also a continuum, a continuation, and it's consistent because I've learned that in palliative care situations, there are different persons, different professionals, oncologists, cardiologists, doctors. And I'm sure that a facility such as this will ensure that treatments are aligned with the patient's goals and values. It forgoes a process of navigating a fragmented system. A palliative care institution, sir, lends support to families. It is not just for patients, but it enhances or embraces families. There's counseling, respite services, there's grief support. And I believe it is a necessary caregiving element. It is a place where people can go for education and training. I remember once the former principal of Comrie saying that Comrie School he would like it to be a place of excellence. And I believe that institutions such as palliative care institutions can also be maybe schools of excellence. It can be a center of excellence, a center of training for professionals in palliative care principles, hosting workshops, raising awareness in the broader community. That is sir, being what we mean by excellence, not only the care, but also raising awareness in the community. But I have always believed in the culture of dignity. I believe that this is the most important of all. A facility dedicated to palliative care nurtures a culture that places dignity, respect, and autonomy at the center of care. Persons, so if I sound a bit somber, it's because I've experienced this. Persons who are dying and in pain were transferred to palliative centers, sir. And they had persons to talk to. They talked not only about their illness, they talked about their memories, their fears, and their hopes. Such persons had their families visiting. And when they die, they do not die in pain. They do not die alone. They are not afraid, but they meet their Creator as though they were resting in his arms. Think about what a benefit that would be to our country and to its citizens. I, sir, visited a palliative care facility, and one of the things that I noticed was the music. The music, sir. It was therapeutic, and I now understand it, sir. When I read a book by Don Campbell and Alex Dorman entitled Healing at the Spread of Sound. In that book, the authors posited that music has medicinal properties. Music is able to heal what hurts. Music helps us to process pain. But having gone through that experience and even sitting there to watch those who are about to leave us, I'm glad, sir, that this is coming. It is coming. And sometimes, though, we have heard that professionals, medical personnel, they say that they're suffering from burnout. And I believe that one of the things I've learned in these institutions, in the institution, a palliative care institution, is that palliative care teams trained in communication and team collaboration are more satisfied with their job because they see the meaningful impact of their work. In conclusion, sir, let us cast our minds to a future in palliative care. We can imagine a place filled with music, nature, love. We can imagine patients not just existing, but living. Living meaningfully, intentionally, even at the end. We can imagine families not shattered by the trauma of death, but supported, held, and comforted. And that is what palliative care facilities do. But while we can imagine it, supporting this move will help us to build it and to make it real. In supporting this resolution, sir, We are daring ourselves to do something compassionate, something wise, something deeply human. And I believe that we can support this with enthusiasm and in the words of Stephen Connor, people can say goodbye, not in pain, not in fear, but in peace. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Reverend Senator Reverend Morris. We deeply appreciate it. Her Honor, the most honorable Senator Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It would be remiss of me if I didn't say a few words, and I really intend to be very brief. I became familiar with BACA when I was ambassador at New York. And I really want to congratulate Dr. O'Neill, who was the president at the time, Jessica Odle, who had worked on the project as Consul General, and then her keen interests kept her involved, and all those persons whom I met, but whose names I do not now remember, and in fact, those whom I may not know, who were instrumental in walking this long journey to this moment. I truly congratulate them all because they are seeking to fill a significant niche in healthcare provision and healthcare services in Barbados. And it is laudable because it speaks to the fact that right-minded people with appropriate skills and influence can help to fill the gaps in our care systems, can augment the services provided by government, and can really do very good and very high quality work that inures to the benefit of the target population as well as to the country as a whole. I don't believe that outside of Trinidad, I think, that there are other palliative care facilities in the Caribbean, so they're also breaking new ground in this regard, and I hope that they will soon be able to expand, because I believe that there may be people from the Eastern Caribbean who want to come here and access the services, as they in fact do for the Cancer Society, the Barbados Cancer Society. And in speaking of BACA's work, I would wish to similarly salute the Barbados Cancer Society and Barbados Cancer Support Services, who also, both organizations of which also do very high quality work. This lease, normally the leases for healthcare facilities of this type or for organizations of this ilk are peppercorn rents. They're really not significant sums that would cause to put them in penury or require them to collect high fees in order to be able to pay the rents. They are minimal. And in that regard, I think, too, we have to congratulate government, because very often we see the work of many of these organizations and we don't know that government actually has a vote in its budget every year for the support of NGOs all over Barbados, which provide services to the citizens of Barbados and indeed from further afield, as Senator Dr. Maynard said, Mr. Maynard said, not just Barbadians, but people who live here. It was my honor when I was, I think, either health or housing minister, I don't recall which one, to give support the access for Cancer Society, the building that they are in now. They have done significant work from that facility and have now outgrown it. And they are pressing government to give them a new space. And I am want to be their voice on this occasion and to say, yes, BACA has gotten their facility, but please do not forget the Barbados Cancer Society. They've outgrown their present facility. In fact, if you consider when I was housing and health minister, it's really quite a long time ago, and not only have they been able to cater to Barbadians, but people from all over the Eastern Caribbean come here, and they have done serious interventions in the marketplace and saved many lives. So we want to be able as a government to continue to support that. It also raises the question of our healthcare planning. We are an aging population. The incidence of NCDs is extremely high. Many members of the Barbadian population, upward of 25%, have either one chronic non-communicable disease, and many have two. The principal causes of morbidity and mortality are cancer, heart disease, stroke, hypertension, and diabetes. And in our planning, we really have to consider how we are going to care for those people with the sequelae of the increasing burden of these diseases, because more and more people are becoming disabled as a consequence of these chronic non-communicable diseases, whether it is complications of diabetes, which is a frequent loss or cause of loss of limb, or loss of digits, loss of toes, and so on, or other, the consequences of stroke, for instance. We see people struggling to walk along the street, and Barbados needs to become more disability friendly, because many places in and out of the city are inaccessible to wheelchairs. If you walk with a cane, it is just as difficult to navigate the space. And if you are like me, sir, and have some arthritis in a knee, you find yourself, really in pain to bend to get into the various spaces. So our planning now, all our planning in terms of our infrastructural development, our roadways, our sidewalks, our buildings, as well as our health planning, has to take cognizance of this change in our health profile and in our disease profile in the country, and the consequences of it and what it means for people who are seeking still to live a high quality of life. In relation to palliative care, I am encouraged by Senator Mr. Maynard's assurance that the size of this facility is adequate for Barbados at this time. But we are going to have to see what the growth rates are like. In addition, it is a matter of concern that it has taken them more than a decade to get this facility up. Given the number of families in Barbados that are affected by cancer, the number of businesses that have access to resources, one would have thought that this was an easy ask. But it has proven to be very, very difficult. And sir, I have been with the Cancer Society helping to collect funds. You know, they have the kettle outreaches, and people look at you and laugh and walk by. The Pink Ribbon Drive, same concept. But yes, the Pink Ribbon Drive where they, and it's very, very difficult to collect money. You know, you have to manhandle some people, actually physically bring them to the donation can and beg, and so it really is very difficult, and it really requires a higher level of sensitivity on the part of our population, because none of us really is exempt from the risk of chronic non-communicable diseases, and in particular cancer and so on, which, if you have anybody close to you who's ever had cancer, the diagnosis alone drives so much fear into the person who's been diagnosed and the close family members, that really we do need to have not just palliative care, but I think there has to be an expansion of counseling services for people who have serious chronic non-communicable diseases that are altering their quality of life and put them at risk. I am trying to persuade my church that we should start grief counseling or related programs, because very often we bury people and tell the family, well, we are praying for you, or we'll be praying for you, but you know, you don't do much after that, and people are then struggling with, where has my loved one gone? The fact that you may not have died, the person died, y'all may not have been on the best terms, and you now don't have an opportunity to apologize or make good. What does it mean from the perspective of faith when you commit suicide? I've had somebody come up to me and say, is suicide an unforgivable sin? What does the Bible say? And I had to say, the Bible says the only unforgivable sin is blaspheming against the Holy Spirit. But people feel a sense of guilt when others commit suicide. And so we have to look. We may be good at providing diagnostic interventions and the interventions which bring healing, but the psychological impacts, the questions that people ask, the difficulty of adjusting when you have lost a limb, what that means for your quality of life, what it means for your self-image, and for navigating things like getting into the bus or moving around. If you had a few chickens in the yard and so on, you know, you may not be as confident walking around or trying to deal with that before. So there are many components of healthcare that we really need to start addressing. It is interesting to note too, sir, and you will forgive me here, that when the ABC highway was envisaged, when people thought that it was really a waste of time, money, and so on, and it was very difficult, sir, to get the loan to construct it, and there was high criticism that it was a white elephant or a white road. Yes. That is a fact. Thank you for the reminder, sir. It was designed originally as a 4-lane highway, and people thought, well, the government has lost the plot now. My late friend Harold Hoyt, before he died, we were driving somewhere and admitted to me that he was one of the people who led a campaign in the newspaper against it and then came to regret it because he didn't buy into the vision at the time. And I'm making that point to say, if you look now at how Coverley is developing, both in terms of residential care, and I often go up to the Coverley development for various services, because apart from the residences there are a number of services which are open to the public. And this is what development of this sort, this kind of infrastructural development, visionary work, allows your nation to open up and develop in ways that where people don't have the vision and can't see down the road, that they do not understand the absolute potential. So if you drove now from the airport straight along the ABC highway onto 2A, when you look at the level of development that road has enabled in terms of housing access, commercial facilities, recreational facilities, opening up the country for transport access. You cannot imagine Barbados without it. You can't. One of my pet peeves, though, is the fact that there is no road between Holders Hill and University Hill. And I keep making the point that the day that there's a very, very serious accident down there or something happens, you are going to be locked in or cut off completely. And government really has to contemplate opening a road that takes you back uphill in the event of a crisis. And it will be well used because that is also a highly traversed area. Reverting then into more hardcore healthcare, sir, I want to make the point that we have to examine, and it's all part in terms of our healthcare planning, we have to examine the kind of specialists, medical specialists that we have, and the ones who are going to be needed. Given the fact that we have a large aging population, there are not enough people, enough specialists dealing with geriatric care, for instance. And they are the ones who have the highest incidence of, oh, I'm so sorry, sir, of chronic non-communicable diseases, and often, you know, death and dying and illnesses and immobility and psychological challenges, and you cannot get to a geriatric specialists in Barbados. If you have an elderly person, we just do not have enough. So I believe that if we are looking, we were dealing with education a few weeks ago on loans for education, that we really have in our healthcare planning to ask, where is healthcare provision going? What are the kinds of specialist skills that are needed? Where are the deficiencies that exist now, and really do far more training. And it wouldn't just be for medical professionals, but a whole number of medical technical professionals. I don't know if that is a legitimate expression. Maybe that is not what they call themselves. But I am talking about people like radiologists and X-ray technicians, and a whole range of people who do support care for our medical interventions. I want, sir, to make just one final note, and it is this. I want to say to sound a particular note of gratitude to the numerous Barbadian and Caribbean people working to keep the British and American healthcare systems afloat. That is the reality. When you go into hospitals in the UK or into the US, you see numerous Black Barbadians who have been trained here, who they poach, some of who are deliberately poached, some of whom migrated on their own, but they are holding up the US and UK healthcare systems, and some of them have tremendous training and specializations and healthcare skills. And this particular facility and the need for this facility in Barbados was birthed by exactly the cohort to which I'm referring now. Medical professionals working in the United States, Barbadian, who understood that there was this huge need and determined that they were going to fill it, and determined, sir, so ardently that though their labor took more than a decade, they stuck with it. And today I congratulate them for this component of their success. And I truly hope that whenever they have an opening, that I will be able to visit, not as a patient, sir, but that I will be able to visit and you know, see what they have created and what they have built. Sir, one could go on. For instance, I think Mr. Maynard, Senator Mr. Maynard, spoke about renal care. And the need for, what do you call them? The things that you do for dialysis, yes, where there's a tremendous need for dialysis. So there is scope for private sector and for public sector, public partnerships and collaboration. There is scope for private sector persons to get into the healthcare business. My concern is I do not want to see, however, the emergence of a healthcare system in Barbados where the costs are very high, and some indeed are in the private facilities where only the people who have can get access to quality care. We must make sure that we keep the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and all government facilities at the very best level in terms of equipment, service delivery, the courtesy and respect and kindness and empathy with which ordinary Barbadians are often not treated. But when you see the same people working in private facilities, because a lot of them at Moonlight, they're the sweetest people in the world. You would not believe they were the same people in the QEA system. So we have to be sure that we treat each other with a level of courtesy and respect, and that our healthcare standards remain the envy of the rest of the Caribbean, not because we want people to envy us, but because Barbadians really deserve the best. And I believe that this new initiative, or this resolution, which I'm happy to support, represents the best from our people living overseas who have determined that they want to ensure that those who live here continue to get the best care. And I really salute them, congratulate them, and say that I'm happy, sir, to support the resolution. Much obliged, sir.
Thank you very much. Senator Cummins.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I want to thank all of the honourable senators who have spoken, from Senator Charles, affectionately, from Senator Maynard, who has long teeth, as he called them, in the medical fraternity and who is well placed to speak on matters of this nature. And finally, from you, Senator Thompson. This really is an important resolution, and I want to take the opportunity, as prompted by Senator Maynard, to ensure that we not only call attention, further buttressed by Senator Thompson, to the work of BACA and all the cancer support agencies. I believe just over the weekend on Sunday, there was the walk run for prostate cancer awareness. Everybody knows the pink ribbon and what that stands for. You have the Barbados Cancer Society, and that is usually for breast cancer. And then you have a number of additional activities taking place in support of little known cancers, or cancers that don't get as much attention or fundraising. And so here is an opportunity, Mr. President, for us to help with the capital raising campaign. I believe I see it here in the notes of $5 million is expected us to be part of the capital campaign, and there is going to be the raising of the financing to facilitate this particular project. And in the same way that we have been supporting the walks, the runs, and giving donations, this is also for corporate Barbados as well as ordinary Barbadians to be able to support the capital raising campaign for this important initiative. And with these few words, Mr. President, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
Thank you, Senator Cummins. The question is that this resolution at order number 8, lease of the vested of land at Coverley International Housing Corporation, do not pass. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The next ayes have it. This resolution is now passed.
Mr. President,
Mr. President, order number 9. In the name of the Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225, the lease to the Barbados Association for Cancer Advocacy, BACA, of property situated at Coverley in the parish of Christchurch in this island, more particularly described in the schedule thereto, to facilitate the establishment of a hospice and palliative care facility for the terminally ill under the terms and conditions stated in the second schedule.
Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The next ayes have it. This resolution is now passed.
Order number 7. In the name of the Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Health Services Medical Reports Fees Validation Bill 2025.
Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, this is a short matter. We were here a few weeks ago to address the Supreme Court of Judicial Validation Bill, where we wanted to ensure that fees that had been collected under the existing legislation were accounted for and have been validated. And in the same way, Mr. President, we do so now under the Health Services Medical Reports Fees Validation Bill, where we seek to ensure that we, one, approve the legislation, one, and speak to the provision of payments for fees for medical reports under the Health Services Act, Mr. President, as part of the fees and regulations approved by the Minister with responsibility for health. This is the very short resolution that is here, Mr. President, and I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution, sorry, this bill. No. Please answer the bill read a second time.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill not be read a second time. You're right.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do not leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do not leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that clause 1 do not stand part.
The question is that clause 1 do now stand part. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that clause 2 do not stand part.
The question is that clause 2 do now stand part. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Madam President, Deputy President, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Will all honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The chairman has reported the passing of one bill in committee. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill not be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be now read a third time. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Health Services Medical Reports Fees Validation Act of 2024.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Health Services Medical Reports Fees Validation Act 2025. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Mr. President, this brings us to the culmination of government's business for the duration of today, and I beg to move at this time that the Senate be adjourned sine die.
The question is that this honorable Senate be now adjourned sine die. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned sine die.